today. Ladies, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having us.
Now, we actually have 4 releases this week. We'll talk about Mary and Michelle's books first, and then Paula Quinn has a release and Sandra Suko has a release. So I just want to make sure we touch on this before we go. And as always, I'll make sure that you have access to the link so you can grab the books if you haven't gotten them yet. So Mary, can we start with yours first? This is Beloved, and it's book 4 in the dual series, and this is the wrap up. Is that right?
Yes. Okay. It's the finale of the whole series. So it solves all the mysteries of who caused the duel and who killed the Duke in the duel and why and how it happened and all the other little mysteries. It ties up the loose ends basically, and also it's a love story of the Duke's son who's disabled, and he's been sort of abused by his father most of his life for being different and not being perfect. Mm-hmm. So he's grown up with no self-confidence and being very sort of prickly and distrustful. But he's also very clever. That was his escape. He escapes into academia with these books, but his father won't let him go to university. So he's got this massive collection of books that he reads on his own and investigates stuff on himself. But he's never actually been out of his estate. So he just lives there as a recluse. And then this mysterious lady who's appeared in some of the other books, just in the distance, she turns up to warn him that he might be in danger, and he doesn't really believe her. And then he knows who she is, that she's possibly has been sent to marry him in order to enable her father. It's getting all very complicated, isn't it? Anyway, I'll leave you to sort that stuff out. I'm getting too involved here.
I'm just waiting for something good to happen to him, the poor lamb. I want.
Well, he gets married and he falls in love, so that's quite good.
Oh, those are good things then.
But it's difficult for him to believe that he's actually loved in return, because he's got all this baggage caused by his nasty father, who is fortunately dead.
Well, thank goodness, that's something.
Yeah,
we love a damaged hero if the damage is not ongoing,
Yeah, he makes a recovery. So it also finishes at the Battle of Waterloo. I should probably say that. Well, not actually in the battle, but everybody's in Brussels while the battle is fought. About 20 kilometers away or something. So they're very close to it all, and all the wounded coming back at the end, and you don't know who's going to survive and who isn't. Well, I do, obviously. Thank God. But, and that's Beloved, really.
Oh, well, it sounds great, and I love the title. Beloved is such a lovely word. It's just such a lovely word. Wonderful. So we're gonna do Michelle, and then I want to circle back around and find out what's coming next from you when we get to the end of the chat. So, okay. And Michelle, this is book 3 for you in the School of Spinster series, and it's Match Me If You Can instead of Catch Me If You Can.
Yes, exactly. So play on words. So this is the 3rd book in this series, and I think there might be at least one more. We'll see how it goes. There's been a lot of writing that I've had to do and a lot going on in life. So, but I don't anticipate that this is the last book of the series. So this will be the 3rd one. And this is the story of a character, Cormac Ormond, who is an Irish earl. And he has a bit of a reputation in London, and people kind of make fun of him because he asks women to marry him all the time. If he finds a woman that is kind and beautiful, he'll ask her to marry him within 10 minutes. And so people just think he's, not, they don't take him seriously, but he actually has a good reason for that. And that is that the poor man is dying. His father died, his eldest brother died, and now he is getting very sick. And his mother and he both think it's a hereditary disease, and he wants more than anything else to be married and to have a son or daughter before he dies. So in his mind, if the woman is kind and nice and decent looking, sure, he'll marry her because he's not going to be alive in another few years. So he's good with it. And so he ends up meeting our heroine, Emma, And Emma's parents despair of finding her a match whatsoever because she's had 5 seasons and she hasn't had a single proposal. And she doesn't really mind this because, she's good. And she also has her own secret, and that is that she's going blind. So she hides that from her family and from her friends. She has some vision, but not a lot. So she's content to stay as a wallflower because she really doesn't want to go out dancing or anything like that to risk revealing her secret. And she also feels a little bit insecure in herself. So when she meets Cormac, who, of course, offers marriage once again, she's starting to, maybe consider it. But she has a problem in that her stepmother is bound and determined to marry her off. And she basically threatens Emma and says, we're going to have an auction. We're going to have a bride auction, and you are going to be auctioned off to the highest bidder.
Did they actually do that?
So they are, the family is basically doing it in disguise. They are advertising the sale of a family valuable, like a painting or a statue. And you bid on the painting or statue, and you get a bride for free in the process of it. It's legal from the standpoint that they're not actually offering the bride for sale. They're auctioning something else, but that's part of it, and everybody knows it. So it's one of those things that Emma is horrified by this. She knows it's illegal.
Of course she is. That's horrifying.
But she doesn't want to be embarrassed. She doesn't want anything like this. And Cormac kind of becomes her unlikely hero. And when she does go to the school for spinsters, she ends up, taking lessons. And the headmistress, Rachel Harding, is trying to bring her out of her shell and make her more outgoing. And then it comes out that she's going blind, and they have to find ways around that. So eventually she does get her happy ending. So does Cormac. And there's a mystery, too, as to what is causing all the men in his family to die.
Okay, so he didn't die right away.
No. So you'll have to see what that is. I really enjoyed the research on this because this is a very out of the box way for somebody to go. So I'll be curious to see what readers think of it.
Oh, cool. Because I was wondering when I read the blurb, it's like, well, the stakes are very clear. He needs a wife because he isn't going to live very long, and she needs a husband before she gets auctioned off.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it was very hard to see how you were going to get from that point to someplace where everybody got to be happily ever after at the end. Trusted that you would, but
oh yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, there are 2 more books that released this week. Sandra Suko's Bedeviling Major Kenton, which is book 5 in the Willful Winterborn series. There's a lot of consonants this week. Sandra wasn't able to be here with us today, but we'll catch up with her on a future chat. But those of you who have been loving the Willful Winterborns will be glad that there's another installment of that. That's another one of those long-running series. I think there are 2 books after this in that series. And then we have a brand new series from Paula Quinn, who we haven't heard from in a long time, and we will catch up with her again soon. If you haven't read Paula in a while, she did an interview with us on the website, so you can catch that and have a chance to catch up with her. And that's The Passionate Heart, and it's a Saxon story, and the lady in that one has to has to seduce the knight, and they kind of end up seducing each other. So that sounds like a lovely, fun story too. And that's the first book in the Hearts of Conquest series, which is actually a re-release that's been extensively rewritten with new material. So there's all kinds of good stuff this week. But before we go on to talk about romance in general and things that we love, I wondered if Mary, you could tell us what's coming next for you.
Next is I'm going back to Blackhaven. It's One Night in Blackhaven, which is a sequel series to the Blackhaven Brides.
Yeah.
So it's really, really nice going back to that world again, only putting some new characters in there. It's a whole new family of them. There's 9 siblings.
Oh, fun. Same time frame or a different generation?
Well, they're the same generation, but there's a couple of half siblings and a couple of illegitimate ones as well, but they all live together and muddle through together. And the Julius, who's a sea captain, he's looking after them all. He's decided they all have to live together until they find their own way. So that's the premise behind it all.
There's not necessarily anything wrong with keeping everybody together until they find their own way.
No, keep his eye on them as well.
Yeah, minimize the damage that they can do. Oh, that sounds great. The Black Heaven Brides was a really long-running series too, weren't they? Like
yes, it's about 14 of those. Yeah, it's a few years ago now. So I've actually forgotten some of it. I found myself to say, where did they live again? Surely I should have written all this stuff down, and I can't find it if I did.
So maybe that's something we should actually talk about, because you had hinted about that before when you said you knew who lived and died because you were God in the stories. And Michelle, you were talking about researching the way the members of the family died, the male members of the family died. How do you keep track of things in your head? How do you decide who you're going to keep and who's going to go? And then how do you stay in a series enough to weave it together? Do you have things that touch points that you hold on to, or things that help you move through a series as you're writing?
Mary, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go first, by all means.
Mary looks like she's looking like her.
You look like you're thinking of.
She's thinking with her head.
I have a different series that has gone on for 7 books now, and that was my McGeegan Brothers series, which was a series of Irish medievals that I did for Harlequin. And I have gotten the rights back to a number of them and have been kind of refreshing them, reprinting them, giving them fresh covers. And I discovered, like Mary, that I didn't remember a lot of things because these were written 15 years ago. So I actually used Microsoft OneNote to start organizing them by book. And one of the most important things I needed to do was eye color. I always forget what color their eyes are. I always do. And so I started setting up a list. Okay, this is the character, this is their hair color, this is their eye color. And then it helps to just get character names and place names and so forth, so I can go back and look it up when I need to. But as far as plotting goes, honestly, I'm a bit of a pantser. I tend to write my better books when I don't think about it too much, when I let it happen organically, which sometimes leads to me writing it 6 times the wrong way before I finally find the right way. It's not an efficient method by any means. It's just kind of the way I go with it. So I would say it's a little more difficult when it comes to bringing plots together, but OneNote is helpful as far as just keeping lists of characters and names.
I have an editor who says, on page 14, his eyes are hazel, and on page 47, his eyes are brown. Is that the same color to you? Like, well, it's close-ish.
I'm sure sometimes they look browner than others.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. In my head, that's what's happening. What about you, Mary?
I start off very well. I try to keep a little Bible of characters and what they look like and where they live and who they're related to and who their families are and their servants, if they have any, things like that. And I start off really well on book 1, and then I do a bit less on book 2. And by the time we get to book 4, I'm just totally winging it because I've got the information from the other characters. So then if I go back and try to do some more books in that series, oh no, who's he? Because I've made no note whatsoever. I have to go back and read the whole wretched book again.
And how old are the children? And how many children are there?
Exactly.
Yes. Has she been pregnant for 14 months? Because that's too long.
I did change the sex of one child once. Of course, somebody spots it. I just forgot, and I thought it was a boy, but it turned out it was actually a girl when it was born. And then I referred to it as a boy in a later book. And I thought, well, that's not very good. I mean, it wasn't really in the story, but it was a good point to pay attention.
Family trees are helpful, I think.
Yes.
I did create a family tree once with the year they were born, which was good until I discovered that the brother I was currently writing was a little older than normally medieval men would live. So it was like, okay, we're just going to go with the fact that he's very healthy.
And then you have to kind of do that willing suspension of disbelief, because things have to happen at a certain pace. Like people need to fall in love at a certain rate. It has to move at a certain pace. And I think in real life, you can be engaged for 4 years and you take your time getting to know somebody and stuff. But in a story, things have to happen
1
faster.
week.
Yeah, and still be believable. Like I don't want to fall out of the story because the timeline feels a little squirrely. So that's always a challenge. How do you guys do your characters come to you all at once, or do you? I know, Michelle, you said you kind of pants your way through things. Do you have some idea of who the people are? Or does the plot come to you first, or what's the kind of core of the book for you?
For me, I would say it's very much just kind of comes out of thin air. It's kind of like when you go to sleep at night and you have a dream and nobody really knows where it came from. It's just kind of there. So for characters, a lot of times it's similar. I'll cook something up in my brain and think, well, what would happen if this person, got together with that person, and what kind of person would do this, that, or the other, So it just is organic.
What about you, Mary?
Yeah, much the same, I think. Sometimes my character doesn't work, the idea I have, and I can see the story's not working because the character isn't right on the page. Yeah. And I have to go back and read it all again and gradually, and then I have this moment of, well, sometimes I have a moment of inspiration. Sometimes I spend a lot of time thinking about it and finally dredge it up. But if it's a good one, then the inspiration comes and I can go back and change little bits. So I was doing that today, actually, on something I'd been working on, and the hero wasn't really working for me. He seemed a bit sort of wooden. And I thought I didn't really want it to be that. So I just went around and changed some things that he said and what he did and how she regarded him, and it all seemed to work much better. So, well, fingers crossed that it does by the end.
I was thinking about that when Michelle was talking about writing the wrong thing 6 times, that feeling that when something's wrong, and you don't know what it is. You just know that it's way harder than it should be. And that's usually when they're like, something's gone off the rails, either with the plot or the characters, or something's just not quite right. And I don't like that feeling. I'd like not to have to feel that feeling, that continuing to bump up against a wall until you find the key to get through.
Yeah.
For me, I have to go back to the beginning a lot of times. And sometimes when I go back and rewrite and add more emotion and add more to the beginning, I start to realize where it went off the rails. Yeah. And usually it's because I'm trying to make the character do something that's not logical for them. Something that doesn't make sense. And if I go back, I can often find it. But kind of pulling back to what you were saying about, characters, one thing I think some of my favorite books looking back have done is I'll pull scenarios from my real life or family situations that to me were hilarious, and I will build them into the stories. Like, for example, my grandfather, when he was young, he had a bunch of brothers and they were climbing trees, as one does when you're young boys. And the eldest brother told my grandfather, if you think about it really hard and you close your eyes and flap your arms, you can fly.
Oh.
Yeah. Sure enough, my grandfather took a leap off the tree, hit a couple branches on the way down, broke his arm, and his brothers were howling with laughter. So, of course, I had to use that in a medieval story because boys would absolutely do that no matter what era.
Boys are there's a reason that it was all boys in Lord of the Flies, because
because they just do dumb stuff. But it's fun to put things like little anecdotes like that and just slide them into a book and think to yourself, well, I know where that story really came from.
So what about you, Mary? Are there things that you pull from your real life that you can use in your fiction?
I don't think I do it consciously. I've thought about it once or twice, but then the scene didn't come up. Only my dad had a dog when he was a boy. I think they inherited it from somebody else. It was a big German Shepherd type dog, and it used to chase them whenever anybody came to the door. It used to chase them down the stairs and bite them in the backside. We were opening the door, and he's a real character. This dog apparently used to sit in the back garden on a sunny day. and the bees would float past it. And it used to sit there surrounded by a sort of semicircle of half bees because he bit them in two.
Oh my goodness.
And I always wanted to get that into a story, but there never seems to have been the right time.
Well, yeah, there has to be a time where somebody could get bitten in the backside by a dog, and the bee circle too. That it feels like that should be a goal.
Next book, Mary.
Somewhere in Blackhaven, there's a dog, and it.
Well, yeah, there is. Well, yes, there is now. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit before we came on, and I wanted a chance to talk to both of you about the romances that you fell in love with, the first ones you remember reading, the ones that kind of pulled you into the genre, and what is your favorite thing aside from the obvious happily ever after about romance reading and writing.
You want to go first, Mary? Or you want me to go first?
Oh, you go first.
Mary is always going to say you go first if you ask her.
Oh, so I would say I was pretty young when I was introduced to the romance genre. I was about 13 years old, and my grandmother was a romance reader, and she loved them. And she used to bring those Signet Regency romances, if you remember back in the day. And she brought me a grocery sack full of those books one summer when I was visiting. And when I tell you, I read my way through that bag, and I absolutely loved them. And then that led to Victoria Holt with a lot of her Gothic romances. On the Night of the Seventh Moon had a very fairy tale quality, and some of those early ones. And then I read my very first, let's say, hotter romance, Jude Devereux's The Maiden. And when I tell you, I was just like, whoa, I didn't know this kind of thing happened in books, and it was amazing. And I loved that book. And I had actually taken it with me on a class trip. My chorus in high school was taking a trip to Austria, and there were a lot of long bus rides. And that book made its way all the way around the entire bus. So Jude Devereux got a lot of new friends on that trip to Austria. But it was so much fun. So I just loved her. I loved Johanna Lindsay, Lisa Kleypas, Julia Quinn, so many wonderful authors. Can't really even name any of them, but those were the ones that kind of got me started.
Lovely. So what about you, Mary?
I was just trying to remember the first one I ever read, and we used to get. My friend's sister was quite a lot older than her, and she used to read. I remember her getting hold of Angelique. Do you remember Angelique? Books by Serge-Anne Golon about they were set in the 17th century. No,
I hadn't read that one.
No, they were a bit hot. Well, at least they seemed that way when I was about 11 or something.
Yeah.
So they were sort of snuck from from my friend into the house. And I never let my parents read them. I just say I borrowed it from Elizabeth, and then I would. That was the first one I remember reading, and Kathleen Woodiwiss, I remember. And yeah, Victoria Holt, I remember. I loved Victoria Holt. Mm-hmm. And the first one, in fact, I read was The Legend of the Seventh Moon. I was completely blown away by that. Mm-hmm. Stewart as well, but I suppose that's not really romance as such, is it? It's just a bit romantic.
It's when you catch a series and like you're in the beginning of the series and you know that there are 4 more books, and it catches you so much that you're like, I know as a kid I was like racing home, or reading on the bus, or anytime I was still. And you know that you get to live in that world for as long as the series ends. I think there's something so magic about that. And I love it when we have really long running series, because it's the same way. The people who fell in love with the Blackhaven Brides are going to get to revisit all of that and then go do this new thing. And the people who are loving the School of Spinsters are going to get to keep falling in love. And I really that reconnecting and staying connected to people in a series, I think is really it's joyful for me. So
I always love it when I find an author who's written 5 or 6 books in a series, because I'm looking forward to, especially if she's finished the series and I can just go and get every book. Love that.
Yeah, I
hear a lot of readers say that they don't start a series until they're all out and then they binge them.
Yeah,
but I can understand it, because it's waiting for the next one to come out can be so frustrating.
Well, and I think we've kind of changed maybe that way as readers too, because now if there's a series on, if there's a series on Netflix, I'll watch the whole entire thing. I think a lot of people consume their content all at once, rather than that I have to wait for Monday night for Castle to come on or West Wing to come on, and that you have to do every week to get that 55 minute episode. And as a younger person, I remember I came to Diana Gabaldon when she was 2 or 3 books into it, so I had a lot of time, I had a lot of pages to read before the next one came out. But that idea of waiting for stuff was something that I think was much more comfortable for us earlier on than it is now. I think we've just gotten used to, we have more than 3 channels. We have more choices. And so, I want it now. I don't want to wait.
Yes. Instant demand.
The danger of that, though, I feel like, is if an author has written 2 books in the series, and if no one buys them because they're waiting for the rest of the series, the publisher won't continue the series. So you either have a multi-book contract, or you have to tell your readers, buy it and save it if you need to.
I think some of that changes a little bit too with Kindle Unlimited. And there's a lot of talk in the author community this week in particular about Kindle Unlimited. But as a reader, I love being able to just pick whatever I want, and not have to, there's no barrier to entry. So if I want to try a series that isn't quite finished, I can do it. And if I want to move from one to another, I can move back and forth, and it doesn't, I don't have to think nearly as much about it. I can just jump. And I like that ability to consume whatever I want, which makes me sound gluttonous, but I guess if we're talking about books, it's okay. So what do you have, Mary? We talked a little bit about what's coming up next for you. Michelle, what are either of you in the Night of Lions?
No, not in that one. No, sorry.
I'm sorry. It was my fault. I should have checked ahead of time. But it is just a quick reminder that the Night of Lions party is coming up on August 26th. And so you want to make sure you jump in for the party, because the authors that are participating in that anthology will all be there to tell stories and play games and do tidbits and things. So that's always fun. And I know Mary, you've participated in a bunch of anthologies, holiday anthologies and things over the years. So we'll have more of those coming up. We're going to do the Once Upon a Haunted Eve is coming up in October, and then we'll do another holiday anthology when we get closer, I'm sure, to the holidays themselves. So, well, ladies, it was a joy to talk to you this week. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm looking forward to more stories from both of you. I'm glad that these poor tragic men are going to find their happily ever afters, and that nobody's getting auctioned off, because that's, I remember reading the blurb thinking, well, she's got to figure out how to make this work. And that nobody who doesn't have to die dies, and the people that have to die. It's like terrible Dukely fathers can disappear and all of that. So we are leaving the world the way it's supposed to be. I think.
That's right.
Ladies, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm going to pop the links to the books in the comments. I'll pop Sandra's and Paula's in as well, so you can be sure you get them. Don't forget about the Night Alliance party. You can always find out on the Dragonblade Facebook page. The events are always pinned at the top, so you can find them there. Our authors are in the readers group on their release day, doing fun things, which when we're recording today, it's actually Michelle's release day. So happy release day to you. So you want to make sure, if you're not a member of the readers group now, you can find the link again on the main Dragonblade page and join that. And there's always good stuff going on in there. So we have got you covered for all your reading needs. So, all right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And we will see you same time next week.